You're listening to Weird and Dead, the paleontology podcast that tells evolution's most embarrassing and bizarre stories. I'm Megan Wetherell.
And I'm Amy Atwater, and we are two living scientists who are weirdly excited about dead things. On this episode, we'll discuss how we are both, some may say, irrationally afraid of seals, but we're gonna stand by our phobia and we're gonna convert you too.
We'll also talk about some of the many animals that have dined on humans and our ancestors for millennia, including lions and tigers and fucking hyenas.
And birds, and alligators, and snakes. And unless you two like eating people, you'll probably not want to eat during this or frankly any of our podcast episodes. So like always, please check the warnings in the description because we told you so.
A fun fact about me that sort of relates to this story is that I once had to swim across a river that was freezing cold because I was on a backpacking trip and we didn't know how big the river was going to be. And there were seals in the river and I was terrified the whole time that the seals were going to get me. And everybody made fun of me saying seals don't eat people. And, you know, hint, hint for today, maybe I wasn't so wrong.
I mean, were you crossing that river in Antarctica? I mean, like...
Listen, if some seals do it, all seals do it. That's how nature works. Were they smaller than me? Yeah, but they're better swimmers.
But it's in their genes, for sure. And I feel you.
Piranhas are smaller than you too. So, and they can take you down. And there was a pack of them.
I think seals are freaky anyway. And then today I learned more. So we'll get into it.
All right, so today's episode is all about, will this eat you? Has this eaten you? I'm sure we'll come up with a much catchier title, but things that ate humans is the general theme for today. So we are going to start off today with a story about Jokodian or Dragon Bone Cave in China, where we have found a lot of Homo erectus bones. Like a lot. They appear to have accumulated between about 700,000 years ago and 230,000 years ago. There's maybe some evidence of artifacts, maybe some evidence of fire. And when all of this was discovered, it was this big blow up of like, here we have what is clearly a cave home for this group of people. That's maybe not entirely the case, because it turns out that if you take a very careful look at all of these bones, you notice some weird patterns. First off, there are 5 skull caps, meaning the back of your skull. There's no faces, just skull caps. Second off, there are some long bones, but not nearly as many as we usually have in the body. And all of the long bones that are there are really fragmentary. They look like they've been broken open and chewed on. So there was some interpretation for a little while that maybe this was cannibalism. But when you look at the pattern of bones being broken, it comes up with consistent comparisons to a slightly different animal. Hyenas.
What?
Hyenas are well known for cracking open bones to get at the marrow.
I've seen terrifying videos of this. I've watched videos of a hyena going through just like someone just threw in like this hunk of like pig neck into this hyena cage, and within 30 seconds the entire thing was gone.
Yeah.
Gone.
Yeah, they will eat chunks of bone. They definitely like the marrow, so they crack open bone. They love brains, so they like to bite off faces because that's the most breakable part of a skull to get to the meaty insides. So there's chew marks, essentially, from hyenas. Probably the more correct interpretation, in my opinion. You know what? It's still controversial. Some people still think people were living there and just occasionally getting eaten by hyenas. But other scientists, including myself, suspect that this is actually a hyena den. And it's not so much showing like 500,000 years of humans living in a cave, so much as it is 500,000 years of hyenas living in a cave, pulling in their prey, which is people. And that's actually kind of a theme throughout a lot of our history. Specifically, hyenas are a big part of our history. This particular species is Pachycrocutta, is the genus, and they are the giant Pleistocene hyena. They're not actually that much bigger than modern hyenas, which should scare all of us. I think we may have undervalued the terror that a hyena
Mad respect.
They were slightly taller and longer, and they lived throughout Europe and Asia through the Pleistocene. And these sorts of accumulations of bones where you see hyena bite marks, you see some places hyena coprolites, so poop fossils, these are common. There's a couple sites in France. There's a couple sites in Spain. I saw one in Israel of a slightly smaller species of hyena. So yeah, hyenas were really fucking up our shit for millions of years.
And it sounds like they were targeting us on some level too. Like, I'm sorry if I didn't catch it. Like, are there other animal bones in these assemblages? Are we by far and away the most abundant? And if so, why? It doesn't seem like Homo erectus would be like, Homo erectus is pretty much us. So, it's like, what about us? I just can't ever feel like we're that desirable of a meal. Like, we just seem kind of not... got a lot there. So like, really, were we targeted?
Listen, if you like brains,
oh, good call.
I think we've got that going for us.
Good call.
I don't know that there's any indication necessarily that they were targeting us. There are other bones that are pulled into these accumulations. So Zocodian has a fair number of deer and that sort of thing. It's just that when we find these places and we find people, we really hyper focus on the people. And it's not actually clear if people were entering the caves initially because there were other animals that were dead and dying in these caves, because we probably were scavenging meat for a long time before we began actively hunting meat successfully. So it may be that humans kind of sealed their own fate by going into these caves. There's some evidence on some of the bones of butchery from humans, so not butchery via the teeth of a hyena. So it is possible that we just willingly walked into traps.
Interesting. Do you think that people ate hyenas? Was this a mutually predatory relationship?
I haven't seen any indication that we butchered hyenas, but I mean, just because you don't see evidence of it doesn't mean it didn't happen. And I'm sure Homo erectus was just as vengeful as modern people can be. So I'm sure that they ate some hyenas at some point. No osteological evidence.
None so far. Oh, man.
It's not just hyenas that have been eating us. There are many, many, many other animals that have been found to enjoy the taste of Homo erectus or Homo sapiens throughout time. Amy, I don't have a better transition to that.
Yes. And this goes, as I was mass Googling for this episode and thinking about, I was like, wow, like prehistoric animals that ate us. And then I was like, okay, a lot of animals around the world today will still totally eat us. And, a lot of the classic ones are going to be like your lions and bears.
And tigers, and tigers, and tigers, and tigers, and tigers.
And tigers, lions, and tigers. Mostly tigers. And, I've had some close encounters with some grizzly bears, but they've never, or brown bears, as I'm supposed to refer to them, because the Alaskan in my life gets very opinionated about how you refer to brown bears. But anyway, I've been real close to them. Never had them like in my tent or in my stuff. But man, I mean, It wouldn't be hard, right? Just one little swipe and I would have been Grizzly Man, because in Grizzly Man, his girlfriend dies too, and her name's Amy. So I was always like,
fate.
Her name was Amy, I should say, because she got eaten by a bear. So happens. Amazing. I don't know if I want to call it an amazing documentary, the Grizzly Man one. It's a Werner Herzog, but it's pretty good. It's very well done and absolutely terrifying. But those are like kind of the typical ones. I mean, but tigers, whew, they seem to really enjoy the taste of human.
Tigers love the taste of human. Tigers have killed 373,000 people or more between the year 1800 and 2009. They take people...
I'm sorry, wait, what was that number? I'm sorry, what?
373,000 people in the last 200 years.
I really thought you were just going to say like 373.
No.
I thought that was going to be the number.
No.
Wow.
They still kill people, even though in many places they're protected and like taken care of and they're not hungry. They're just bored. There's, I guess, a couple of tigers that are in a location in India where they're in like a tiger sanctuary. which people are not supposed to go into the tiger sanctuary for a variety of reasons, including tigers. But there's fishing that they do for crabs and things, and they still get attacked and eaten in their fishing boats. So there's a video of a tiger launching itself into the river to try and get onto like an open canoe structure. And in that case, it didn't succeed, but they do kill a couple of people every single year just in that region alone. So much so that in local villages, there are people known as tiger widows who lose their husbands to tigers. Yeah. So tigers.
Wow.
Just really, really proof that we are not as secure and safe as we like to sometimes think we are.
Those numbers are, I'm still having a hard time wrapping my head around that. I feel,
It got worse, I guess, in COVID because people were kind of desperate for income sources. So there was like an uptick in tiger death related to fishing activity, which I believe most of that fishing activity is illegal, primarily because they don't want you to die via tiger. But desperate times, desperate measures. Tigers are definitely not domesticated. They're just one of the big cats that happens to really interact with people a lot and enjoys eating them. But it's not like cats and hyenas and feliform creatures are the only predators of people. Seals eat people, right? Or they try to.
It's true. It's true. They are all carnivores, so they're living up to their family name, that's for sure. But one of the predators we don't tend to think of, I think we think of big cats. We definitely think about bears. We even think about wolves and something like those as threats. But really, no, seals, sea lions, like, okay, I wouldn't want to get like squashed by one, that wouldn't be a fun way to go. But in terms of like hunting humans, I'm not a huge, I would never consider that until I read The Endurance, which is a book. It's a nonfiction book about Ernest Shackleton's famous journey to Antarctica and back, which is the epic part. And it's like the most insane book I've ever read. And their journey to Antarctica and whatnot, they get trapped in the ice. All hell breaks loose. Like, it's just not going well. And multiple people in their party were stalked and hunted by leopard seals. So I had never heard of leopard seals before, besides like maybe just random mentioning along with other seals. And then it was like, oh no, these are giant seals. I mean, they can be like 10 plus feet long. I mean, they're all muscle and blubber. I don't know if all seals have this, but apparently they have claws on their front, somewhere on their front paddles, which, because they can't really use them for anything, is it a vestigial feature? I don't know. I didn't dig into it. I have questions. But because they can't actually put any weight on their flippers, so they still are just like stomach, gastropods in their own way.
Are they hunting people on land? They're like
So the dangerous place in both the Shackleton journey, which took place in like the early 1900s. No one died on that journey, which is probably the most incredible part of all. But one of them was like stalked on like kind of right where the ice meets the ocean. So that seems to be the danger zone for leopard seals. And then in like the 1980s, a researcher was grabbed by a leopard seal in that same kind of an environment, and his colleague had crampons on and just like crampon kicked this seal in the face until it let go of this researcher. And then in 2003, similar situation, a researcher was right on the shoreline and a leopard seal grabbed her and dragged her down and actually killed her.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she passed away. And that's when they investigated this whole report about how dangerous are leopard seals, because there was an actual fatality, which makes you wonder, with some of those other early Antarctic, wow, sorry, brain, world's upside down. With some of those journeys, are there any other cases? It's Antarctica, so I'm like, there's probably no ancient human record of this interaction. Yeah. But leopard seals can make it up to like New Zealand and Australia sometimes, that far north. So there is a chance for more human leopard seal interaction. And it really only seems to be a problem when we're right on the ice and they're still in the water. And I guess the thought is that we're confused as penguins because when the leopard seals interact with like scuba divers, they're super friendly and they even are kind of interactive and whatnot. So they do not seem to be at all threatened or at all in predation mode. They seem to recognize that we're not their prey item, but maybe being on the ice. And if you want to see what they do to penguins, oh man.
I feel like it kind of makes sense that they think we're penguins. Like, you're all like swaddled up in all of your warm gear. You're kind of wandering.
Yes.
They probably just think they hit the jackpot of the biggest fucking penguin of all time.
Yes. Good point.
I wonder if they're like, whoa, what else would walk on 2 feet out here? Come on. It's a
This
penguin,
other
clearly.
big fluffy bipedal thing. So they do love to eat penguins. They also eat a lot of krill in different times this year, but I'm sending you a picture of how they hunt their penguins. So I just sent you that picture through the chat.
Okay. I mean, the first thing that you really see in this photo is the nostrils, because this leopard seal is launching itself out of the water. It looks like it like met a penguin mid penguin diving into the water. Like these two animals are colliding midair. And it has.
That's what's happening.
I don't think that's what's happening, but it does look like the penguin like voluntarily dove into the leopard seal mouth. I would not have guessed that their nostrils were that big, but it looks like it must be stoked to get a penguin. And the penguin's head is just straight up in the leopard seal's mouth, and the penguin doesn't look happy, but the leopard seal sure does. Yeah.
Yeah, and so exactly that's a beautiful description. This is how they actually kill their prey, because they can't use their little flipper claws, and all they really are is a face full of terrifying teeth. So they just grab, kind of like, I think orcas kind of do this too, where they just grab the head of the penguin and then they just go thwack, 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 and actually just flip it out of the water, smacking it into the water until it breaks open, and then they're able to mow down on penguin innards. So it's a very it's not you don't like to envision being a human involved in this situation in any way, shape, or forms. Yeah. So those are the leopard seals. They're definitely, I would totally go to Antarctica if the opportunity presented itself and I wouldn't have like 12 anxiety attacks. But I would be afraid of leopard seals. I mean, they've earned my respect for sure. And, don't judge a cute little seal by its giant nostrils. It might eat your face. So the seals that I felt were stalking me were harbor seals, which are significantly smaller. But they have spots just like actual leopards. So yeah, they didn't get me. They didn't even come close to me. They actually swam away from me. But how could I really tell that they weren't coming from underneath? It's dark. It's a river. It's cold. I would not have handled that situation well at all. I feel like I don't do well with open water situations, usually, especially the ocean. And one time I went kayaking in Alaska, and it was just like, a little harbor seal or something. But what I don't like about them is how they just pop up, right? And then they're like there, and they give you this like look, and they have kind of those big dead eyes. And then they pop back down, and then like a minute later they pop back up, and they're way fucking closer to you. And you're like, no. No. You stay away from my boat, buddy. Yeah. Because, like, I would be fine if I fell into the water or something, but for whatever reason, it's like the dun-it. It's like they just keep getting
seal
closer.
Popping its head up to double check that you're still there.
I think they're freaky. I mean, I also think they look like dogs. I mean, they just look like ocean dogs. So that's what I think of too, but they're like ocean dogs with dead eyes and really terrifying teeth. So yeah, I'm low-key afraid of seals too, and even more so now.
So as far as we know, seals have not really killed that many people, both in the modern record and in the fossil record. No. But it is worth pointing out that it's actually pretty difficult to conclusively demonstrate that animal A ate animal B, because I mean, a lot of reasons, but first off, like, sometimes you eat the whole thing, so that makes it go bye-bye. All of your evidence is gone. Sometimes the bite force that killed the creature doesn't impact bone. And that's the only record that we get. So if you're killing something and eating something, but you don't hit the actual bones hard enough to leave distinct marks, you're scot-free. You get away with that evolutionary murder. But there are some other ways that we can tell when animals are consuming one another. And one of the big ones is just the way that the bones are accumulated. So do you have a lot of skull caps and not the fronts of faces?
Bad sign.
Bad sign.
Get away.
If you see just a whole bunch of open skull caps, go. Like, literally, if there's no hyena there, it does not matter. That's not a good place to be.
No.
So yeah, the way that bones are accumulated can be a really great indicator that something ate something else, especially if you are at least looking at something that has like a modern relative. So, you know, hyenas, we know what their accumulations of kills look like, not because there's a hyena, like a dead pachycrocodile, sitting there being like, this is me, this is my stuff, I did this, but because we can look at the way that modern hyenas accumulate bones and destroy bones and eat bones and poop all around the bones. So it's one part, did you actually leave marks? Are those marks actually diagnostic? And or do you accumulate bones in a weird and specific way? So those are the ways that we can tell specifically that certain animals have eaten us. But if they don't leave those marks, and they don't leave any accumulation, like a specific accumulation, then yeah, you're kind of screwed. You're not going to get... So there's a lot of animals that definitely have eaten people that we have no idea really ate people, because they would eat one at a time or something and maybe not put big old marks in its skull.
And what are the chances? We've already discussed before, but we will reiterate this constantly. Fossilization is an extremely rare process. This does not happen to every single skeleton that ever existed. That'd be cool. It'd be like the catacombs everywhere. But that's not how it goes down. So even if an ancient human, which again, in terms of the like what they represent ecologically, is a very small part of their ecosystem. So humans are already a really small part of your ecosystem. You're way more likely to find an ungulate than a human because of just sheer numbers. And then you happen to have to find the human that was nibbled on by some other animal and be able to tie that. Like, it just makes it so much more complicated than the whole process of fossilization already is. So it has to be a perfect storm to have fossil evidence that we find that indicates that some animal was eating us, which is amazing that we have as much as we do.
Yeah.
Because that means a lot of animals have eaten us over time, which is, you know, we should be honored. We should be honored. We're a part of the animal kingdom. It's a rite of passage.
Maybe we're not sitting in the place on the food chain that we really would love to occupy, which is the tippity top. But we are still involved. We are still a part of the food chain all throughout our history.
Exactly. And it sounds like I think I mentioned this to you, Megan, that I worked on these itty bitty fossil primates, monkey things in graduate school. And it was usually just isolated teeth that we would work with. And one of the things that we would look for on the teeth is sometimes they would have this, it's really pretty. It's like acid etching on it. And it'd have these beautiful kind of lines and discoloration. Looked like it had been soaked in acid for a little while. And those were teeth that had been digested by something that had eaten that little Omamaya, had eaten that little primate. And then the teeth, again, yay, enamel being so hardy, it made it through your poop. So we were finding pooped out monkey teeth, essentially. I can't believe you have me saying monkey.
I've permeated your brain.
But it's pretty cool that we could, but what we don't know is who ate it. What we'd have to look at is, again, it wouldn't be a for sure there are direct tooth marks that fit this predator's tooth size. It would have to be like, well, we know that there's this creodont out here, so it might have been this creodont. We know that there are birds out here, so it might have been this bird. But besides that, it's just we don't have any direct evidence to say this monkey thing was eaten by this crocodile. So
it is
but it's
remarkable to me how many fossils, not of humans, this is not a human related thing, are found that we probably are just like decayed owl pellets, where owls just went and they ate a whole bunch of animals, they puked up their bones and then they kind of left them all in a pile. Yeah, there's a lot of fossil sites that are like that, which is... Thanks, owls.
Thank you. Thank you. You did all of the hard work for us. You put all of the bones, just the bones, into this great little fossil-friendly environment, and then you left. It was great. Like, thanks. And then you probably pooped on it, which probably helped keep the oxygen out. Like, thank you. So, yeah. But it is, you know, this is a fun topic, and it is a lot of detective work as well. And it does sound like, you know, while a lot of animals out there would love to eat us, it does sound like it has definitely been worse in the past. And I think that we're going to take a quick little break, and then we will get into more fossil horror stories of man-eaters. So we'll be right back. Looking for the perfect new nerdy addition to your wardrobe? How about fancy fossil shoes made by Megan herself? Her store, geopedalfabric.com, has all the best nice but niche footwear like trilobite high tops, how freaking cool, and mosasaur decorated lace-ups. Enter code WEIRDANDDEAD at checkout for 10% off your order.
If you're enjoying this episode, consider supporting us on Patreon. You can enjoy tons of bonus content for less than you'd pay for a bag of plastic quote-unquote dinosaurs that somehow always has Dimetrodon in it. Oh, welcome back from what I'm sure was a really invigorating, very interesting, and consumer-directed commercial break. And if you also would love us to give you just as good of a commercial break as we just did, yeah, you could pay us. We would take your money. We would. Now we're going to talk about what else has killed people in the past.
Yay!
Yep.
More man-eaters. And there was a Just Dance song for it. Like,
oh, was there? Oh.
Anyway.
And it looks good. Yeah, that looked really smooth.
Yeah.
You can break that one out at the club for sure.
How do you think I got all those men's I ate? Obviously, the club.
I thought you were just pregnant, but you...
And we know that if a male paleontologist found my remains, they would assume that I ate this baby and that I didn't actually have was a female with a fetus. They would go, oh, these men were cannibals.
And yet somehow they would make a diorama that made it look like you were fucking the fetus, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it would just be totally... Anyway, this is why everyone is needed in science. All perspectives are needed in science. Help us. That's actually a great segue to what I want to talk about, which is...
It is?
Yeah.
Terrifying.
Well, you know this about me, is that I do study primate evolution, or I did. I don't do too much of it these days. But for graduate school, my focus was on early primate evolution, which meant like the fun, cute little things from like 50 million years ago, okay? Like cute little lemurs and tarsiers and like little prosimians and just cutie patooties. And we actually have like decent sample sizes with those fossils, and we have a fairly good idea of timing and geologic time and geochronology. But when you start to get into human evolution, then you get into one of my huge pet peeves, which is the entire field of human evolution, actually. Yeah. I used to love it. It totally inspired me as a very small child. And then as I became more and more involved in academics and realized how gatekeepy it was and how very just not friendly, very competitive, very cutthroat, some characters who do not have the best reputation. And what bothers me the most of all is these huge overarching like conclusions drawn from like a couple of bones, right? Like we're like, oh, it's a whole new species of human and it's based on one tooth. Mm-hmm. And if you study any other type of animal besides maybe raptor dinosaurs, which have a similar problem, and I blame pop culture, You know that you actually need way more than just like one freaking isolated tooth to have any good handle on if you have an actual new species or not, because individuals vary, guys. We all vary. This is why you need a big enough sample size so you can say anything about the population, because we're all variable. Look at the heights of Megan and I. We are very different.
No, this is an online venue. I could be tall. You don't know. You don't know how tall I am. She could be short. Look at her.
Not.
She's so small. She's just head level with the washer. She's not sitting. This is her real height.
Anyway, this is my little, like, I remember writing about this man-eater in graduate school for our blog because I was so over learning about human evolution and all of what felt like really overdrawn conclusions based on really limited sample size. And so I became obsessed with this kind of offshoot topic that's tangentially related to human evolution because it's about the crocodile that ate early humans. And that just brought me such joy to know that A, that animal existed, and B, people were studying it and bringing light to the fact that it's not all about the people, man. Like, there's some really cool other animals who found us delicious. And that's how I learned about Crocodilus anthropophagus, which is arguably one of my favorite scientific names of all time, because it literally translates to the human-eating crocodile. So crocodilus, crocodile, and then anthro is human, and phagus is to eat. So it is the human-eating crocodile. And it was awesome. It was awesome. It lived around the same time as Homo habilis. So we talked about Homo erectus earlier. Homo erectus is one of the later humans, one of the bigger, taller ones that, again, looked a lot more like modern. Yeah. And then Homo habilis lived earlier. Homo habilis lived like 1.8, 1.9 million years ago, I want to say. And that's where we also get Crocodilus anthropophagus in this place, this very famous site that I'm sure a lot of folks have heard of, which is Olduvai Gorge. So Olduvai Gorge is one of this like, localities that people make a really big deal about in the human evolution game because it's been really productive and has given us a lot of understanding of this kind of Pleistocene time. And that has quite a few different records of human evolution sites. So we literally have Homo habilis there about 1.9 million years ago. And then we also get Paranthropus boisei, which is my favorite of the weird Australopithecines, which is like the nutcracker man. Is Paranthropus boisei. And then we also get Homo erectus at this site and Homo sapiens there too, because Africa was a happening place for human evolution. But Crocodilus anthropophagus lived at the time of Homo habilis and apparently really liked to eat them because we have some pretty solid fossil evidence of their predation. And again, we talked about this earlier. How do you know? We know with this case because of these pits and grooves and scratches that we found in, it's essentially a foot of Homo habilis that was preserved. So we've got like the talus, which is the ankle bone. It's called the astragalus in other animals. We've got the whatever, those annoying bones, metatarsals. There we go. And they've all got these scratches and a lot of pits. So that's the number one thing that they're looking for. And they also have material from this crocodile at that site, so they can do a direct comparison here. Again, this is one of those perfect storm situations paleontologically where we have fossil evidence that something ate this, right? Those pits and grooves are not random. They are significant, and they were not produced when we dug it out of the ground, because you can tell the difference between something that happened while the organism was alive versus if you fucked it up excavating it 2 million years later. And we have the other animal. We have the crocodile and its teeth to literally look at the size of its teeth and figure out what size pits, grooves, and scratches it would produce. And they match all of these things on this foot bone. So talk about your Achilles heel, Homo habilis, but they ate the crap out of it. And it's really, really, really fascinating. And I was just reading that there's also another Homo habilis specimen. So that the foot is OH8. So if you're a huge human evolution nerd, you will know that specimen, OH8. So there's another one, which is OH35, which is a tib fib. So like your lower leg. So it looks like it's a left tib fib. And yeah, it looks like the proximal ends, so the ones closest to the middle of the body, look like they have feeding traces from like a leopard-like carnivore. So apparently humans were delicious not only to reptiles, but also to mammals. And like we've talked about, cats and humans, man, which is funny because I love my cat. And I also acknowledge that she will eat me if I die, and it wouldn't take her that long.
She has tried to eat me. Like, she's not waiting with strangers. Yeah.
No. And like she's doing this thing to me lately where she'll like come up and like sniff and whatnot and then do a gentle like bite, just like this little
just a little test bite.
I am alive. I am alive still. Please, like I'm sleeping and she comes up and is like, and I'm like, dude, I'm still alive, cat. Yeah, so it's I don't know. I think I put a lot more. I think I'm projecting into my relationship with my cat, and I think she sees me as a future fancy feast. So, and it's in both of our genes. Well, not mine. I should know better. Obviously, for millions of years, we've been attacked by cats. Yeah. So maybe we shouldn't be like, hi, cats. But we are. And cats have a long history of mowing down on us. So it's just, so you can take your classic human evolution sites and get all excited about that. But there are really cool animals in there that were also eating us that I think deserve just as much acknowledgement and story time and praise. Dang it. Give them the cover of nature, not just some other, anyway. And I digress. So those are things that make sense to me. But I feel like, you know, with like the leopard seals, that was just like another unexpected animal. And I feel like there's probably some other unexpected animals we haven't talked about yet. And do you have any insight on some other weird ones?
Birds. Birds are bad.
I mean, like, are we talking like terror birds? Is there any evidence of those big terror birds with humans?
I don't think we overlapped enough. I think terror birds went extinct a little bit too early on. So, well, there were some in South America, like in the Pliocene, right? But no, not giant predatory walking birds, but giant predatory flying birds. Even scarier.
Flying, but
that is how I feel about all animals, right? Like, if you can swim in the ocean and you can pop up your head any which way, I don't like that. I can't track you. If you're a bug and you can fly, I don't like that. I can't track you. And birds, yeah, flying is kind of one of their definitive features. And there is
for those penguins, those worthless penguins. Yeah.
Well, that and the like 6 different times that the radites have lost their ability to fly.
I know. They're like, no, we're over it.
Yeah. But yeah, so there is some evidence that harpy eagles and eagles of similar size, so big fucking eagles, have killed not grown adults, but babies. Because it turns out that babies are kind of easier to snatch. Not that surprising, I suppose. They can't really fight back. They're a lot smaller. They're easier to carry off. And so the famous specimen of bird predation is the Tong child. The Tong child is about 3 million years old, and it is a specimen of Australopithecus africanus. And it has these really distinct scratches in its eye sockets from where the bird grabbed it by the head, dug its claws into the eyes, and pulled it up and off somewhere. So the next time that you go to one of those birds of prey shows and they tell you to like hold your kids still, that is why, is because some of those big birds, they probably can't kill your kid and they probably won't kill your kid, but they might. So hold on to your toddlers.
But in the past, they have.
In the past, they have.
So...
And in the modern day, harpy eagles, for example, hunt monkeys and small primates to the extent that I think it's like 50% of a harpy eagle's diet is primates. So there's today things that specialize on primates. It's not so unusual and unexpected that in the past there would have been some birds and things that also specialized on primates. Probably less so on specializing on baby Australopithecus. Certainly baby Australopithecus and other similarly sized primates would have been a very good food group. So, yeah, big bird. Not always nice. Sometimes.
Wow.
Really mean.
And that it's just really very interesting that that the harpy, is that what the one that you said eats about 50% primate?
Yeah, harpy eagle.
Yeah, and so they like the taste. They've been doing this for a long time.
Yeah.
They have acquired. They're like, oh yes, what do you want tonight? Oh, how about some more howler monkey? Wrong continent. Never mind. Sorry, got my monkeys mixed up.
I know. I do think actually harpy eagles are from South America, so I wouldn't have been.
Then I was right.
But there's some big birds across our world, and some of them will definitely eat people if they have the chance.
I just think that is absolutely wild. That tongue-child is a really famous specimen because it's very well preserved, and we, especially for the only part of the body we care about, which is the skull. It's great, yay. So again, the fact that this specimen was killed, was someone's prey, and then was preserved in such good condition, and then was found, is just, I remember learning about finding this specimen. Yeah, it was found in a lime quarry.
Yeah.
Like all of these kind of like limestone deposits, which is so weird to me to think of like going to a lime quarry for fossils, because that's not like where we find vertebrates in North America as much, but it's very
Joe Codian is also a limestone cave, or a series of limestone caves, but it's they're accumulating sediment inside those caves, and the accumulated sediment is the actual. So it's not limestone is the host rock for a lot of these deposits, but a lot of these deposits are actually things.
So do you think that being, Australopithecus definitely had the ability to be bipedal, whether or not it was 100% bipedal is still debated and whatnot. But do you think in this case being bipedal was a detriment, because it was just like, look at these holds, they're right here. Look at these pockets. Hi, with our big forward-facing eyes. Like the harpy eagle is just like, I'm gonna go rock climbing on your face. Like just.
I don't know. I mean, I do want to clarify that we do think that the tongue child was about 3 years old, so really more toddler than baby.
Okay.
So probably still capable of some degree of upright walking. But yeah, maybe that wasn't such a good thing. I mean, it does not look like it turned out very well for this particular child. Whether or not it was evolutionarily disadvantageous, I don't know. But obviously this little kid didn't have a great day.
But we did continue to evolve and get even taller. But maybe that's like, it was,
some of us.
You gotta get, you're still tall enough that I don't think a bird would take you on, unless it was like a cassowary, because I'm very, very afraid of some of these large flightless birds that we have. Like, I feel like a cassowary could kick you and do some serious damage. So...
Well, so the other thing, so we're just going to segue now into a podcast about which animal could we take in a fight. And
perfect.
The thing about most birds, right, when they fly, they have to have those super light bones, but things like cassowaries, they don't fly. They don't need to have those super light bones. They're much heavier and denser. About 5 minutes ago, I had a realization that there are no piranha-like behaviors in birds. And then I realized it's probably because birds, your bones are going to get broken if you get smacked at. So why hunt together? Anyways, cassowaries, I'm surprised that they haven't formed bands and begun killing people.
Taking over the earth.
That could be the next stage.
A cool project that I got to do some research on in very early undergrad was on cannibalism in people. Like, we're talking about all these animals that eat people, and we're kind of dancing around this big obvious thing that is like, well, humans are humans, so of course we're going to also have eaten each other. And that seems to be really, really prevalent, like a lot. I wouldn't be surprised if Homo erectus was occasionally doing that, but would we be able to interpret the evidence as cannibalism? Those are interesting questions, because when I think of cannibalism in humans, I think a lot about Neanderthals that were known to be cannibals. I mean, Neanderthals are interesting because they're pretty much humans, right? We know that we interbred with them. So on some level, I don't know why we act like they're a different species, but fine. They are morphologically differences if you want to focus on those. But species are all a giant scam, and none of them really exist anyway. So we'll talk about that more, I'm sure. But they're very closely related to us, if not just fully us. And they're very interesting because they're the first record of being able to see humans actually taking care of their dead, burying their dead. I think they're the earliest occurrence of art that we have. So like there's this idea that the first occurrence of like art and culture and religion even are with Neanderthals. But man, they weren't so advanced that they wouldn't crack open a cold one. And by that, I mean each other.
A cold one?
Well, I mean,
are they waiting until they're dead and cold, or are they cracking open a hot one?
They lived further north, so maybe they were cold by the time they got to them. And maybe it was opportunistic. Again, I'm not sure if it's like, again, hunting or scavengering. Like that's another thing that we can't necessarily get at with just fossil evidence alone, which leads to very interesting questions. But yeah, I mean, there's lots and lots of evidence of that Neanderthals were eating each other. They like the skulls that have been processed in some of these caves that are like 100,000 years old. It's like they have cut out the chewing muscles. So they're essentially going for some human barbacoa by cutting out like your masseter and your temporalis, and then also marks of cutting out the tongue, because I guess that was also delicious, and going after, like we've talked about, that bone marrow. So especially in your bigger limb bones, that's going to be a really good source of just energy and fuel. So they process the remains of deer and other butchered animals the exact same way that they process these human bones, which is why it's pretty clear they were eating them too. It's like, why else would you break open their marrow cavities and then scrape out all of their bone marrow? You know, it's probably not because you're doing a science experiment. So Neanderthals were definitely cannibals. And then a few other favorites are, the Cro-Magnon people. Like, they're like some of the...
I mean, not personally, but yeah.
Well, they're probably there's a little bit of them in all of us. These are ancient humans that were true Homo sapiens that lived in Europe. And there's this cave, the Go Cave, I think that's how it's pronounced. And it's, I think it's somewhere in England. I don't know, somewhere on that island that is a thing. So, and their ice age, so we're talking like 14,000, about 14,500 years ago. It's another cave, and it's more processing of human bones. And like you already brought up with the skull caps, one of the ways they know that this is definitely planned and definitely potentially even like a ritual is that all the other bones in the skeleton totally smashed to get at all the meat and all the marrow, except the skull cap and just the top of the skull. And you don't want to go too far back because then you get your foramen magnum, and you can't have that because then you can't use your skull cap as a bowl or a cup. So
you can't use it as like a thumb hook for your bowl.
I mean,
you could hang it.
It could be like a ladle. It could be, But
that's true.
Yeah. But I don't know if the rest of the skull shape works for that. So, they find these caves that are just like scattered with crushed human bones and then just perfect skull caps that have been processed for eating and drinking. It's very clear that the face again has been carefully removed so that you can just get those cranial vaults to be perfect cups for your future. So I just want to remind people, we think we're so high class. Britons were eating each other not that long ago. Okay. Not that long ago. And I mean, I'm not saying let's bring it back on the menu. I'm not saying let's go Soylent Green. I just think it's unless some sort of Soylent Green company sponsors our podcast, in which case yes, we will. Thank you for listening. If you like the podcast, be sure to rate and review us on your listening platform of choice. We really, really, really appreciate it.
If you'd like to hear more and support the show, you can follow us on Patreon for some exclusive bits or on our various social media platforms. You can follow Amy on Instagram at Mary Anning's Revenge.
And Megan on Instagram and TikTok as Geopedal Fabric, or both of us at Weird and Dead on Instagram and TikTok. This podcast is brought to you by the Geology Podcasting Network, produced by the Traveling Geologist, aka Chris Spencer. Our theme song is Unlock Me by Praz Canal. Cover art was provided by Chris Spencer and the hosts.
Editing services were provided by Abby Jansen and Chris Spencer and a little bit of us as well. And this has been hosted and researched by us, Amy Atwater and Megan Weatherall. Thank you for listening.
Oh, it was a real thing. It only existed for a year, but it was called Hufu, and it was a tofu designed to resemble human flesh in taste and texture. And vegan cannibals rejoice. There's finally a plant-based person.